Between 2019 and 2022, I almost quadrupled my salary. I went from being on £30,000 per year to a little over £115,000. I currently work in tech, specifically in DevOps, but I haven't always had a career in tech. And in 2019, I changed careers from the charity sector. Back in late 2018, I was working in the charity sector as a senior payments manager. I'd worked in payments for the best part of a decade, and to be honest, I was getting bored and had kind of hit a bit of a career ceiling where I was. An opportunity came up in the same company to be a senior manager in a different department, so I took that, but it was a fixed term contract, so I knew at the end of those 12 months I was going to have to find something else to do. It was around that time I found a new passion in web design, so I was spending countless hours in my spare time learning all of the tools and techniques on how to build fairly mediocre websites, to be honest. I was never that good at it. But during that process, I kind of fell in love with the idea of hosting my own websites. So I dove headfirst into server management, how to set up virtual private servers with major cloud providers, and really started to cut my teeth learning things like Linux and the Linux terminal. From there, it really opened my eyes to a completely different world, one that I didn't even know existed, and I decided that was going to be my new career path once that contract was over. Before this, I had no technical background, I didn't go to university, so don't have a degree, and so I knew it was going to be tough right from the outset. But I was undeterred, and I spent more and more money on Udemy courses, on YouTube, and reading books, and spent an awful lot of time learning all of the skills required to be what at the time I thought was going to be a Linux system administrator role. I was learning the ins and outs of servers, bash scripting, Linux, a little bit of Python as well, and doing all of this in my spare time whilst juggling, spending time with the kids and a full-time job. To make sure my learning was focused and I was staying on the right track, I decided to look online for junior system administrator roles. I needed to know the skills that were going to be required and things that companies and hiring managers were looking for. Unfortunately, I was left disappointed in that search. There were very, very few junior roles, and so I had to do a bit more digging to find out why that was. And it turns out that these roles were actually being replaced by a new hybrid role called DevOps, and a DevOps engineer specifically. Now, DevOps isn't really just system administration, but with everyone moving their workloads to the cloud, it was deemed that a DevOps engineer, which is a merge of development and operations, was the go-to role for not only the system administration, but actually moving resources and controlling resources in the cloud. We're also responsible for increasing velocity for releases, building, testing, pipelines, automation, all of those things. So with this new information, I then went back out to the job boards looking for junior DevOps roles, and luckily found a bunch more. So I got about a dozen together, printed off all of the job descriptions and started to read through and highlight those with similar skills across the various roles. And that gave me my very first iteration of a roadmap. So it gave me a nice list of skills, about 8 or so, where I knew that if I had those, or I was going to need those to do that role, even at a junior level. That first list of skills consisted of Linux, Bash, Python, Terraform, a cloud provider, Git and GitHub for source control, Jenkins for CI/CD, and also Docker for containerization. Now at the time, I didn't really know what most of that stuff meant. Obviously, I had the Linux side of it from hosting websites, but most of it was brand new to me and I had to dive in, and it was really tough. Now, I chose Udemy and YouTube because I learn best by video. I like to watch the trainer teach me everything they know whilst they're typing out the code and I'm coding along with them. I just find that kind of repetition really helps cement the knowledge in my brain. From the time I first started learning web design to the time I got my first job as a DevOps engineer was pretty much exactly a year, and I calculated the rough amount of time that I spent doing the learning and the practicing, and I sunk the best part of 1,000 hours into that process. Now, 1,000 hours is an awful lot to cover in a year. It's roughly 3 hours a day. Like I said, I had a family and I had a full-time job at the time as well, and it was a slog and it was difficult. There were points in which I wanted to give up. When I actually started applying for the junior DevOps roles, I decided to hedge my bets. I was really enjoying the Python stuff, so I was applying for both junior Python roles and junior DevOps roles. Now, I must have applied for about 100 different positions in total, and it was only when I stumbled across a small startup in the same county as where I lived that they happened to have both a junior DevOps and a junior Python role available at the same time. I applied for both and then got interviewed for the Python role initially. That was my first ever technical interview and I absolutely bombed it, didn't get the call back. And then about a week later, they got back in touch with me for the DevOps role. They'd obviously seen something in the original interview that they liked. So a fairly short interview for the DevOps role, and I was offered the position and got put on my first ever junior DevOps contract, which paid £30,000 a year. So whilst I was working as a senior manager before in the charity sector, I was actually earning close to 50k. Now with this new job being only 30k, that was quite the drop, and it required quite a serious adjustment to lifestyle, and things were super tight for a long time. But I was super happy. I was living the dream basically. I was doing the job that I loved and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was picking up new skills. I was kind of given free rein at a small company. I was the only DevOps engineer in the team, and it was only a team of about 10-15 people. It was really good. I learned a bunch of stuff, and I was, like I said, I was allowed to learn on the job. They paid for some certifications, which I got in Microsoft Azure, which was the cloud platform I used at the time. And they employed a super talented senior Python developer, which I sat next to, and I learned a bunch of stuff from him as well. And then something strange happened. After updating my skills on LinkedIn and adding the DevOps role to my work experience, it was like it flicked a switch for recruiters and tech recruiters on LinkedIn. So I started getting opportunities sent to me almost daily, and I hadn't even said that I was looking for work. This new and exciting DevOps skill set was in high demand, it seemed, and so eventually, with some of the salaries that were being sent my way, I started to accept some interviews and ended up being successful for my first promotion or move to a mid-level role in another company. So within just 5 months of getting my first DevOps role, I had another offer on the table for a mid-level role, this time paying £52,000. It was a much larger company. It had another team of DevOps engineers that I could learn from, so it seemed like a fantastic opportunity that I didn't want to turn down. So not only was I going to get the benefit of working with a larger team of experienced DevOps engineers, I was also getting paid the most I ever had. And for the first time in my career, I was also going to get a bonus. It was only 5 to 7%, I think, a year, but I was already earning a salary larger than anything I'd ever had before. And it took me under 6 months to do that. So I was super relieved and almost justified to myself that it was well worth the change of career. So having joined that company, fast forward 12 months, and yet again, I'm on the receiving end of multiple offers on LinkedIn for new roles. The DevOps market has absolutely exploded in the UK. The salaries are going through the roof. And following a fairly straightforward recruitment process, I'm offered a senior DevOps engineer role at another large company for £70,000 a year. They seemed to love my background, my journey, and really appreciated my previous experience from my other career. And that has always been a major talking point. And I spent almost 18 months at that company where I was learning more and more skills I never had. I got to use cloud technologies I'd never even heard of before, got to work with a fantastic team, some of which I'm still in touch with today, and it was a really good experience. The DevOps market, though, continued to move, the salaries continued to grow, and actually within about 12 months of me being in that company, my company went out to the market to make sure that all of the DevOps engineers were being paid accurately and our salary reflected what was available in the market. They deemed that actually it wasn't, and so I went in one day in the middle of the week in February and came into an £18,000 pay rise, which then put me on £88,000. It's not every day you get an 18k pay rise, is it? So you'd think with a pay rise like that, that would keep me there for many years to come, but unfortunately the working environment was starting to turn stale, and within the course of about 6 to 9 months, most of the DevOps engineers were leaving. So I too put the feelers back out in the market and ended up in about a dozen recruitment processes for various companies. This time I was much more picky though. I didn't really have to move. I was already earning more than I ever thought was possible. I wanted a really good culture, a great team fit, and a bit of sense of purpose. And so despite being in the running for several roles over 100k at the time, I actually took one at a smaller company, a scale up, the one that I still work at now, and they paid me $95,000 for a senior DevOps engineer role. Now, I joined this company in August 2022, And one of the main reasons for choosing them over some of the other higher paying roles was my line manager or potential line manager. We really hit it off in interview, and I thought it'd be a great person to work for. However, within about 2 months of being there, he left the business, and I was kind of left thinking, what the hell have I done? Should I have made a different decision? I did get on really well with the other DevOps engineer in the team though, so we kind of just dug in, got some work done whilst they recruited a replacement. Now, I've never been one to pass up an opportunity, and with my previous line management experience in my previous career, I threw my hat in the ring and was very lucky to be successful and ended up getting a DevOps manager role almost exactly 3 years after my first ever junior role. For the new role, I was given a nice 15k salary bump, which put me on a little over 110k. We also get paid for like on-call here as well, so with that as well, it was over £115,000. And so there you have it, my journey from £30,000 to over 115,000 in a little over 3 years. So what have I learned? I've been lucky. I absolutely know that. But I've also worked really hard. Those 1,000 hours didn't come out of thin air. I had to give up spare time, watching films, watching series, to really put the time and effort required to get the skills and get to the level, because I knew I would be competing with people coming straight out of uni with degrees in computer science and what have you. Sometimes though, you need to be in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you need to put yourself in those situations, so should the right opportunity arise, like the one that I got in my current company, that you're there to take it with both hands. I was 33 when I changed careers, so it's never too late. If you're unhappy in your current role, why don't you map out a roadmap for yourself, start learning the skills, and start to be the change you want to see in 12 months' time. If you've made it this far and you found it interesting, then drop a like and a subscribe. I'd really appreciate the support. And if you're really interested in getting into DevOps specifically, then you can check out this video where I go through my career tech roadmap to give you all the skills you need to become a DevOps engineer. Until next time.